Now that you've created an enemy and a projectile that can destroy that enemy, it's time to give your enemy somewhat of an artificial intelligence so that it can move on its own. In order to make our enemy something that can move, we must first return to our frame editor. Remember, to return to our frame editor, we simply can click on this symbol up here that looks like a white block surrounded by gray and blue squares, or we can press and hold on the control key and press the letter M, and it'll take us back to our frame editor. If we want our enemy to be able to move around, we must first adjust the type of active object that it is. We can do that by simply clicking on our enemy. Once we click on our enemy, we'll notice that we have the properties menu over here changes. So we're going to simply click on our movement options on the enemy. So once we have the enemy selected, we click on our movement option, and it shows us that our enemy is a static type. And static type is something, like we said before, stays still, it doesn't move. So we have to change this type by clicking on it, and we're going to give our enemy a bouncing ball movement at first. So a bouncing ball movement is a movement that makes our enemy bounce around the screen. Let's push F7 and see what happens when we give our enemy a bouncing ball movement. So as you can see, our enemy just walked off the screen. Now, if you were thinking about the conditions that we created before, we know that we must give our enemy some perimeters that it must bounce in between. So now that we've given our enemy a bouncing ball movement, we must make sure that our enemy doesn't just walk off the screen continuously. We must give our screen or our frame barriers so that our enemy can bounce against the wall and return to us when it bounces against the wall. In order to do that, we must set the position of our enemy. So now we set the position of our enemy by returning to our event editor. So we're going to simply click on the event editor. We click on that icon, or once again we can hold on the control button and press E to take us back to the event editor. We now have a new condition that we must create in order to limit our enemy's ability to walk around the screen or off the screen. So we're simply going to right click on line 4. We're going to right click on our enemy, and then we're going to go down to where it says position, and we're going to go down to where it says test position of whatever our enemy is. I have the goblin leader, you may have something else. So we're going to go to test position. Once we click on test position, this window will open up right here. We must simply click on all of the arrows in the inside. This tells us that our enemy can only move inside of the white area of our frame. So when we click on all of the arrows on the inside of this window, it lets our program know that our enemy cannot leave the white area of our frame. We're then going to click OK. So now we have a sentence that says when our enemy leaves the play area, so that means when it tries to walk off of the white area of the screen, it must do something. We're going to want it to bounce, so we're going to put bounce. We're going to go to line 4 where when the enemy leaves the player is located. We're then going to place our mouse cursor under the tab with our enemy on it on line 4. We're going to right click there, we're going to go to movement, and then we're going to click on bounce. So now we have a sentence on line 4 that reads, when our enemy leaves the play area, it will bounce. Let's press F7 and see what that looks like. So now you see our enemy cannot leave the white area of the screen, and now it makes it a little bit more difficult to attack our enemy. Try to shoot it. So that's how you create one form of artificial intelligence to make your enemy move on its own. Let's return to our frame editor by either clicking on this icon at the top of your screen or by pressing the control button, pressing and holding the control button, and then pressing the letter E. Now let's return to our frame editor by simply clicking on this icon at the top of your screen or by holding on our control button and pressing the letter M. So that's the bouncing ball type of movement for our enemy. Let's look at the path movement for our enemy. So let's just go down to where it says type. We're then going to go down to where it says path. Alright, and then we're going to click on edit from path. You have these different options that show up when you click on edit your path. What you're going to do is you're going to click on new line, and as you can see, a line pops up with two black dots. This is going to show the area that your enemy is going to move. So whenever you add a new line, it's going to give your enemy a path or add something to the path that your enemy is moving on. So I can have an enemy that moves from here to here, etc. If I want to make a more complicated path, I will simply click on where I want the initial path to be, and then I will add a new line from there. I click on new line again, and voila. Now I have my enemy moving at pretty much a right angle. He's going to come from this direction, and he's going to move there, and then he's going to move down to here. If I want him to loop this movement, and I want him to move back and forth from this movement, I would have to tell him to reverse at N and then loop movement. I have to make sure both of those are selected. I'm then going to select OK. Now let's press F7 to see what happens. We have our enemy walking back and forth from the path that we set it. So now I know where my enemy is going. One thing you may notice is that once I destroy my enemy, if I move my character around, he still can go off the screen. We don't want that to happen at all. So let's return to our event editor and see if you can apply the conditions that we applied for the enemy not to leave the play area to our blue diamond hero. To do that, you're simply going to right click, create a new condition, position, test position of your blue diamond hero, select all of the arrows on the inside so that it cannot leave the play area, and the sentence is going to read, when our blue diamond hero leaves the play area, we're going to go under our blue diamond hero. So we're on line 5. We're going to locate the tab with our blue diamond hero on it on line 5. We're going to right click under that tab. We're going to go to movement, and we're going to tell it to bounce or stop. I prefer bounce. So now whenever our blue diamond hero tries to leave the play area, he'll bounce. Let's press F7 to try that out. So now you see, let me go ahead and destroy our enemy. It's getting a little difficult. There we go. And now, whenever I try to leave the white area of the frame, our blue diamond hero will bounce off of that area, so he can't leave the frame and be out of our user's view. Now that you know how to make sure that objects don't leave your play area and also create collision conditions on your play area, another aspect that most video games have is background. As you may notice, when we press F7 to test our game, we have a functioning enemy and main character, but what we don't have is a background. So in order to add a background to your game, so let's make sure every time we modify our code, we always make sure that our testing application is closed by clicking the big red X. We must add a background or a backdrop to our game to give it a little bit more natural feel to it. So in order to add a background or backdrop to our game, we must do that from our frame editor. So let's return to our frame editor by simply clicking the frame editor icon at the top of the screen or holding on control and pressing M. return to our frame editor. So there are several backdrops. You can actually import your own backdrop from the internet, but for now, let's stick to just using what's in our local library. So if you're under the game options, you see you have several options. Let's go to backgrounds. As you can see, there are several options for backgrounds. You have these things called tiles. Tiles are kind of used to build sections, and like for platform games. We're not going to use that. We want to actually get a backdrop that's going to cover the entirety of our frame. So let's go to click on space backdrops, and then just drag the backdrop up to the screen. And as you can see, now we have a backdrop for this board. If we push F7, we'll now notice that our blue diamond hero and the enemy is on a space background. So what I want you to do is find you a backdrop. There's several options. Most of them you're going to be looking for items that say backdrop more than you're looking for things that say tile. So if you click into something and it's just a tile or something that looks like this, then it's just a tile that you can add to your game. You don't want to add tiles, because tiles are like objects that you can make into to platforms. You want to add a backdrop object that's going to function as a background to your game.